Hello, everybody. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we are on social media. If you guys can just hashtag RCOE Esports. And welcome to the Riverside County Esports Symposium. My name is Ileana Mendoza. I will be your moderator today for esports. I'm here to provide virtual support for both you and the presenter during the presentation. So if you have any questions or need assistance with Zoom, you can use the chat icon on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and search for moderator, and you can send a direct message to me. The title of today's session is the Esports Education Playbook, Empowering All Learners Through Inclusive Play. And our presenters today are Steve Isaacs, Chris Aviles, and Jesse Lubinsky.
Hello. Let me grab our screen.
Oh, Chris is coming in.
Okay, I had a feeling. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good. How are you?
Is that Chris? I feel like I hear him even.
What's up, fellas?
How are you?
Not bad. We're in the middle of bedtime ritual, so I apologize for any screaming. And then
for everyone who's here, if you have questions while everyone's presenting, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat, so these guys can focus on the heavy lifting.
Yeah, and honestly, we prefer it to be, as interactive and discussion oriented as possible. So while we have 8,023 slides, we'll happily throw all of them out to engage in discussion and respond to questions and stuff. But anyway, so here we are. I do hope my screen is sufficiently sharing. I never quite trust that until somebody says it's there. Yeah. So why don't you, maybe do a quick intro, Chris? We'll tell our full stories in a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Chris Aviles. I'm a teacher for the Fairhaven School District here in New Jersey. When I'm not doing that, I'm also the esports coach. And I helped found Garden State Esports, which is a nonprofit here in New Jersey that helps schools start their own esports team with Steve and Regina Schaefer. And Steve, Jesse, and Christine and I wrote a thing called the Esports Playbook.
We did, in fact. So yeah, my name's Steve Isaacs. I until January 28th, I teach game design and development for Burns Township Schools. I've been teaching for 28 years, and I've decided to start the next chapter of my life, which will be as the education program manager for Epic Games. I'm super excited about that. But I am super proud of the fact that with Chris, we have done pretty great work, I think, in New Jersey and really nationally, internationally with esports, and founded probably the second NASEF affiliate, I do believe. And as Chris mentioned, Chris, Jesse, Christine, and I had our book published just about a week ago. So we're still riding, the high and the wave of having our book published.
Amazingly enough, we're still a #1 new release on Amazon. I can't believe it's lasting longer than Hanukkah, if you could. So my name is Jesse Lubinsky. I'm the Chief Learning Officer for Ready Learner One. We are an innovative learning solutions provider that has been partnering with Garden State Esports and doing some really exciting work with Chris, Steve, and Regina. And the first piece of which was the Esports Education Playbook, Empowering Every Learner Through Inclusive Gaming, which came out last week and which we'll be talking a little bit about later.
So, we've especially Chris and I have presented a lot because we've done a lot of work together over the years, and we always love to share kind of our stories of how we got into this space and all. And of course, Jesse has his awesome story as well. So do you want to kick us off, Jesse, with your origin story?
So I have been a gamer for most of my life. Actually, it's funny because someone was joking with me today that I just basically hoard Amazon gift cards until the next system comes out, so it'll be covered by the time something comes out. But when I formed Ready Learner One with Micah Shippey and Christine Lyon Bailey, who also co-authored this book with us, we were looking for ways to bring emerging technology to schools at a faster rate of adoption. So when we talk about things like augmented and virtual reality or esports, these are things that have been coming along and clearly have beneficial teaching and learning outcomes for our schools, but which kind of experience that slow innovation creep that we see, right? Where school, we have our early adopters. It takes years of kind of progression for those things to happen. And we wanted to find a way to expedite that. And so we actually released another book called Reality Bites, Innovative Learning Using Augmented and Virtual Reality, which was more on the AR VR front. Steve was actually a contributor to that book as well. But with esports, it came at a perfect time, kind of the synergy between, we had already had a deal in place to write this book on esports. Steve and Chris are renowned experts in the field of esports. They started like the first middle school programs. They've been doing such amazing work between what they do in their schools and with Garden State Esports. And the truth is, when you take a look at the benefits that esports can offer to students, it almost becomes a critical priority to bring that to the forefront, not at the typical slow rate of adoption, but to make sure educators understand what the deal is, that it's not just video games in school, that it's much bigger than that, and that you have to really give time to yourself and to your colleagues to understand what esports is really all about.
You want to go next, Chris? Before the baby starts crying?
He's going to make an appearance shortly. I have to hold for a few minutes while we trade off. But yeah, so for me, it kind of all started for me when StarCraft came out. I was always big into PCs because that's what I did with my dad for fun when I was little. And in 1998, StarCraft came out, and that was the first time that my friends and I ever saw this LAN thing where you can play each other. So automatically we started setting up competitions and playing against each other. And then, local spots around here in Jersey, like Radio Shack and stuff like that, started offering little tournaments, and we would go play in them. So I've kind of been into it, since it started, but I didn't even know it was called esports or that was a thing, not on the internet following, anything like that. And then, kind of time went by, I started teaching. And what was really kind of interesting is there was this intersection in 2011 where I went to a StarCraft 2 tournament in Atlantic City, but I was also coaching football, wrestling, and track for my school district. And I was just, instantly hit by the idea, I have kids in my school who would love to do this. They're not interested in traditional sports, or, maybe there's size issues or disabilities that, don't allow them to play traditional sports, but they love competition, right? And this is kind of when kids were starting to define themselves more and more as gamers. So since 2011, I've been trying to bring it to New Jersey, and it took about until 2018. I moved school districts, and the next year they approved my middle school esports team, which was the first in the country. And what was interesting is because we were the first in the country, there's no other middle schools to play. So we actually started playing colleges. And that's kind of interesting for two reasons. Is number one, that college connection that I built by playing colleges, we'll talk about later and how important that turned out to be. But also it got us a lot of press. We were on NBC and PBS. We got a lot of national news stories. And so a lot of people started to reach out. Hey, how do I do this? I want to do this too. And that's kind of cool because 3 years after, I started helping people start esports teams. Steve and I founded Garden State Esports, which our mission is to spread esports to schools in New Jersey. So it was kind of neat that started. But the other thing about being the first middle school is that I got to find other middle schools to play. And my first phone call was to my good friend Steve, who I knew had a video game club. And I asked him if he'd be able to put together a competitive team to take on my kids. And, I'll kind of let Steve fill you in on what that was like and how that came to be in the world of Mr. Isaacs.
All right. So, my gaming days date way back. I'm going to certainly, you're going to realize how old I am, going back to the Atari 2600. And then, I had an Apple II Plus, which was I was just so thrilled to have this personal computer and be, hacking around on it. And even with my 300 baud modem, if anybody could do any math, it's a lot slower than internet connections today. And even through that, it was you would start to communicate. This is before the internet. So it was going to bulletin board systems and making these connections and starting to collect games and get really into games and, trade games and have friends over to play games and stuff. And that was my, a big part of my youth. In fact, just as a hobbyist with the computer and all, and finding other kids who were doing that too, that was a big thing. And then I got into teaching, and I actually started in special education at a science and technology magnet school where there, fortunately, they had interesting, technology resources. And I started to learn real quickly how for my kids with special needs and also very individualized needs, that technology played an interesting role and sort of, in terms of, learner-centered, design and such, and creating opportunities specifically for individual kids, and a lot of which happened through games. That was just sort of my, getting into the intersection of technology and education. And then the technology director at that school and I got to talking, and this is when like internet cafes were starting to pop up and stuff. And we decided to open up a computer like training center, which was mostly going to be summer camps and after school programs. And then, we tried our hand at the internet cafe part in the evenings. And we found that my wife and I had a wonderful time sipping coffee and surfing the internet alone with no customers during those hours because of where we were located. And then all of a sudden we started letting kids come in the evening to use that time to like make up classes and things. And then we started playing multiplayer games. And all of a sudden we fell into this idea of this LAN center where kids would come in and play multiplayer games together on our network. And that just blew my mind to see kids in this space where they were in the same room enjoying, the competition. And, when you're playing a game like 6 versus 6 and 6 kids are in one room and 6 kids are in the other room and one team wins and the other team, just starts jumping up and high-fiving and everything and all that fun stuff that goes with that. It was, kind of like how Chris said, you start to think about where this can really fit in education and the opportunities it could provide. So my next job, I started teaching computer classes and evolved into teaching game design, and then starting my game club, which was always billed as the idea of being a casual game club, but with also the idea that we would get into competitive gaming. But what I noticed initially was that because we set the stage as sort of a casual club, it pretty much remained fairly casual until that phone call from Chris came in. And I then approached my kids and I said, hey, anybody, play Rocket League? Any of you interested to play against another school? And their eyes lit up at this idea of playing against another school. And that changed everything, but not everything. Like there's still a very casual component to my club, but now I have several competitive teams, and you start to, work with them differently and separately and stuff. And that's been amazing. I think our track record against Chris's team is actually pretty good too, despite the rigor and practice regiment that he puts his teams through compared to mine sometimes. But, what can I say? But we got that on our side. But anyway, and then comes all the, the getting more involved with esports and then when we started with Garden State Esports and COVID hit and we started doing all these activities that we'll talk about a little later too, around creating opportunities to build community around gaming for kids. It all just continued to, expand and prove how valuable, these opportunities are for kids. Oh, look at that. That's our book, everybody. It's apparently available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, in case you're interested.
Wherever you get books.
We're all fine books are sold.
We're all fine books are sold. So, so we talk a lot about, there's, with everything in education, I think there's the important element of the why, which is really the most important part. And also, of course, the how. And we try very hard to cover both, but the why is extremely important. And I'll kick off to Chris to, go through some of these.
Yeah, so I'm assuming everybody here kind of knows what esports is, but I think number one perspective I always like to take is as somebody who has coached traditional sports and played traditional sports for a long time. Whether it's wrestling, football, track, esports, right? That's just the lens that we teach students life lessons through, right? I would argue I learned as much about life on a wrestling mat as I did in the classroom. And so after doing this for 3 years and helping others do this, I can 100% confirm that esports is as meaningful to students and their character development as traditional sports. I've taught my kids, the obvious stuff like leadership and teamwork and communication. I've had conversations about, my kids about sacrifice and how you put the team ahead of your own needs sometimes and stuff like that. And again, those are all lessons that I learned, from coaching an esports team, right? So that's one perspective. Esports as a sport does in fact have those traditional values that we want to teach our students, right? And so as Steve goes forward, the other thing is this: the esports industry is probably one of, if not the fastest growing industry in the world, right? As of 2019, massive money. Esports is part of the $180 billion video game industry. We know with COVID, right, every major network, as well as every major sports team who is scrambling to fill time during the outbreak, right, all turned to esports, and that just propelled it forward. The industry, right, the prizes, everything, is getting more and more well known. And I remember, right, I had a conversation with some folks over at Blizzard, and they were explaining to me 24 jobs for every one professional player. So what it comes down for me is, number one, if we're serious about STEM jobs and we're serious about getting kids, placed in these lucrative in-demand jobs, right? Many of them are going to be in the esports ecosystem. And I say ecosystem is because that these jobs, right, aren't players, right? There's a 1% chance and a 1% chance that our kids become pro players, right? The average esports career is shorter than the NFL career, which is only 3 years. But there are so many opportunities, right, to get a job somewhere in that esports ecosystems, and it can be more traditional, like an accountant, public relations, business manager, IT side, or it could be something a little bit more progressive or STEM related, like video production, like software development, back-end design, game design, and stuff like that, right? So there's studies out there that show you, I'm trying to recall the name of it, but it was something like of esports, of high school seniors that are going to college who are also on the esports team, more than half of them majored in STEM careers, right? And that's what we're seeing through Garden State Esports as we build up colleges, to help coach our students. I always ask their major in computer science, IT, engineering. So there's a direct connection. And what's cool about esports is you can also have that team behind the team, right? So I have my players, but then I also have kids on my team who fill other roles. I have casters, statisticians, I have a team podcaster, I have a team journalist, right? So we can give kids hands-on experiences with a lot of these careers in the esports ecosystems, right? And that's because it really is more than just a game. So you're talking about, you have, right, the traditional side of things, teamwork, communication, leadership can all be taught through this. You have the ability to bring in the CTE part. And what I love is when schools get cross-curricular. So they're going to the English department, having some students come and write pieces. They're going to the graphic design, program in their high school, and they're getting the kids to do the logos and the jerseys. They're going to the web development and their computer science classes, and they're having kids make apps and build the websites for the team and stuff like that. So, that to me is really exciting. Especially because you're starting to see some of these college programs who really get it, right? My favorite is Doc Haskell over at Boise State. He gives away scholarships not to just or only players, but he also has a scholarship journalist on his team and a scholarship program manager who oversees, what looks like $1 million production facility where they're streaming and casting. And if you talk to him, he knows, right, that part of growing the esports program at his school is going to be through the articles that are written, going to be through the production side of things. So there's opportunities. Mark Deppy and his crew over at UC Irvine, they give scholarships to students in exercise, who are majoring in exercise science, so they can go and be the health and wellness coaches of their esports team, who are, mandated to work out a certain amount and stuff like that to maintain their scholarship. So there's opportunities that go beyond just being a player in the game, but being involved in that esports ecosystem. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to Steve, the new thing that I've been ranting about is that not having an esports team is actually now a detriment and an equity issue. And I'll give you an example, right? There's like 195 colleges, I think, offering about $14 million in scholarship. If you don't have an esports team, right, kids can't take advantage of those opportunities. The other side of this too is one of the things that we're launching in the fall in Garden State Esports is a varsity letter program, how students can earn a varsity letter for esports. And that's because if I go to a high school that does have an esports team, and my resume is up against a kid who goes to a high school that not only has an esports team, but also is a 4-year letter winner, well, it very clearly somebody's resume looks better than mine. And so not only is not having an esports team an equity issue, right? It's also now not having it as a varsity component to a scholastic experience is an equity issue. So you have all these careers, you have all these opportunities in college and beyond. 3 of the 5 branches of the military have esports teams and esports opportunities that kids can pursue, right? So that K through 12 pipeline, that career and college pipeline where we want to send our students to middle school esports, their high school esports team, play for the college esports team, and then maybe get a career in the very lucrative ecosystem, to me is a huge, huge benefit, right, on top of the traditional sports and the obvious inclusivity and diversity that esports teams bring. You want to tackle some of the SEL, Steve?
Yeah, so I mean, gosh, SEL. So we talked about this in the opening quite a bit too, and esports lends itself so well to SEL, from the onset, really in terms of, and a lot of it's in a very organic way, but a lot of the things that you do in traditional sports in terms of, holding kids accountable and stuff like that, we still include, but we've seen, an improved sense of belonging, which is huge. That's one of the things, Chris and I always trade stories about is the kids that would, otherwise don't have a connection to school now have a very big sense of belonging. Kids that, aren't going to be necessarily the athletes or such, or even would otherwise just go home after school. And now they actually have a place to belong and participate and be an authentic part of something. A lot of people in that first session also talked very much about the truth behind the behavior and attendance. We heard of kids, in the opening session about, a lot of the kids that are, could be bored to tears through the day. And the only reason they're staying is because maybe they have, participation in an esports program after school, just like the same thing would be the case for a kid who plays football and that's the reason they go to school. Health and wellness is huge, and Chris has been doing, you'll see some more information about the curriculum and such that they've written around SEL and health and wellness, but it's very, what I like to say is it's really things that you need to incorporate into the esports program because it's important, but it's also very, intentional and purposeful and, is going to help with performance and all of that in addition to, nurturing the whole child. And again, and we mention it all the time, but that safe, inclusive, affinity space that everybody deserves. And that goes back to what Chris said, even about equity. Like if we're not offering these things, we're actually not providing for a definite population in our schools. In terms of skills, this goes back to that same idea kind of again of there not being a tremendous difference between traditional athletics and esports. The playing field might be different and, the kids might have certain skills, that lend better to competitive gaming and might not have those other skills, but you're still talking about communication and problem solving and analysis and reflection. Most esports programs have kids, rewatch the videos and analyze their performance and strategize based on that. Again, kind of like you would sit in the locker room after a football game and watch the tapes and all of that. So there's so much to the actual skills of the gamer. And we've also talked so much about the skills that go beyond the game. And that's one of the things that's, in some ways I would say unique to esports right now, because I think we're looking at esports from this interesting lens right now where we're saying, you know what, why don't we take this activity and really build a lot around it? So we have, curriculum around esports. If you've looked at some of the NASEF curriculum in English language arts, they have a full 4-year high school English program that uses esports as the context. And again, it's like not every kid would necessarily want to take that path, but for kids that do, they're learning communication skills, in context with esports. They're learning the journalism skills around something they're interested in and all of those things. Chris and his team, some of the folks at Garden State Esports that worked with Chris on the SEL curriculum, that's, tremendous. And again, I think the beauty of it is that we're teaching these things in context. Chris and I talk a lot, about navigating digital culture within our clubs. And again, it's like digital citizenship is fine, but I'm not a fan of the way we have a digital citizenship program where we take kids through some kind of, inauthentic, scenario to teach digital citizenship when we can do it, in a very relevant way. So there's so much. And the career readiness, Chris talked a lot about the different career paths and all of that. So I know a lot of people have questions around implementation. I could toss it back to you, Chris, for a little bit if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to open it up and take some questions.
Yeah.
I'm happy to have anybody unmute, jump on, ask some questions. Steve and I love to make.
We had a question in the chat about students are at home and using devices provided by the school, like Chromebooks. So, what are some web-based options?
Yeah,
for students?
That's a great
Chris,
question.
I saw you answered in the chat, but why don't you tell everyone out?
Yeah, I started to. So I mentioned Minecraft, which I'll leave to Steve because that's obviously his department. But one of the things that we're piloting in Garden State Esports and we're pretty excited about is GeForce has a cloud gaming program called GeForce Now. And it allows you to play any game that you own through their cloud gaming system. We have 2 districts that are piloting Rocket League on Chromebooks using GeForce Now. There's a free option, and then there's a paid option at $5 per kid. We're having really good results. We're using kind of middle of the road Chromebooks that you would typically find in a school, like 4 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM or something like that. Right. But overall, that's been a wonderful surprise, is that cloud gaming does have a place in esports. The difference between the free option and paid option is basically being timed out. You get a 1-hour play window, and when that timeout, you have to go back in the queue, and that could be as fast as 30 seconds to get back into the program. Or, my kids have reported sometimes during high traffic times 2 or 3 hours wait time.
Ooh.
The $5 basically fast tracks you so you don't have to wait. It's not like a performance thing. But Steve, tell them about Minecraft and the amazing things.
Yeah, I will, but I also do want to touch on that idea of, we're moving into a whole new space with cloud gaming, and GeForce Now is amazing. Like you could play any game, and the beauty is because it's streaming, you're not worried about the video card on your side and things like that. Now, I think this is all going to come into its own a little more with 5G technology and really, but we're finally getting to a place with bandwidth that we can do that. So, I'm excited about the possibilities there. Now, Minecraft. So Minecraft, it was great to be in Steve's session just prior to this, because they're doing a lot in Riverside County with Minecraft, which I was so excited to hear. In my opinion, Minecraft was sort of like the why haven't we started bringing Minecraft into esports yet title, because it sort of lagged in terms of that, and it makes so much sense. Building, we're very much about building the K-12 to higher ed and pro, if so, pipeline, and elementary and middle school, Minecraft's a perfect title. We've been doing some really neat things. It's Oliver. We've been doing some neat things with build challenges in Minecraft through NASEF, including we started with the COVID-19 challenges, and we did a series of challenges that we opened to a global audience and got a lot of traction there. And then even ran the same program then with the Department of State in Mexico, and had another huge group participate, and that led us to then moving to something called the Minecraft NASEF face-off, where at a time, again during COVID, where professional sports were struggling to keep their fans engaged, the Anaheim Ducks and a few other teams partnered with us, and we did a number of build challenges around hockey to engage people. And we had some great submissions in terms of the hockey arena, where people created fully playable hockey games in Minecraft to be played in the arena that they submitted, which was really wild. And then we did something called the Minecraft Masters, kind of similar to either, like the Lego Masters kind of thing. And that was an international competition. We had teams from around the world submit this initial build to decide who were going to be the teams to go on to the actual Masters competition. And we had teams from the United States, Mexico, the UK, and Egypt make it into that finals, where we had 4 weeks of multiple rounds of play that were live, shoutcasted, where they did these build challenges and such. And now we're in the middle of the Rube Goldberg challenges, which is a partnership with Rube Goldberg and NASEF and Garden State Esports and Florida Scholastic Esports League, which is ramping up now to the big, digital Rube Goldberg competition, which is going to run from January to April. So you could still get involved in that as well. And then I'll throw one more Minecraft thing out there. Is there's an organization called CompMC, and they're doing competitive Minecraft in very much a competitive esport way, like you would see, any like Overwatch, but now it's Minecraft, and it's capture the flag, and it's, high intensity like all these other esports, but it's with a title that is more appropriate for, the kids that we may serve. So yeah, Minecraft has found its way into esports for sure. This is some of the stuff from Garden State Esports. So I'll let Chris kind of talk about it, because we're talking about implementation, and we wanted to give you sort of just the basic structure of how to get started with esports for people who are just thinking about starting clubs.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of the groundwork now, basically going into year 2, and we're finding a lot of interesting things. So we're finding that on average, we have esports teams that are about 20 kids. We're finding that mirroring athletic seasons seems to be the best way to implement within a district. We're finding that we have 2 types of coaches. We have coaches that are either big esports enthusiast types of coaches who are knowledgeable in the game and are able to maybe even coach themselves. Or we have the educator who is a student favorite and became the coach of the esports team because they wanted to do something nice for kids. So it's interesting, all of the I guess we'll call it research, we're tracking a lot of different habits and different ways to do things. And so one of the things that we've done a lot of work in is what is the easiest route to onboarding an esports team in your district. And so the route that we are suggesting is that schools identify an advisor, letting them know that that advisor does not have to be a gamer. It just has to be somebody who loves kids and is open to, some new things. After that, holding an interest meeting for students is really important, because that's how you're going to determine how many kids you might see, how you're going to run your program, how many games you might offer versus seasons and stuff like that. But also the interest meeting is a way to, I don't want to say weed out, but the interest meeting is a way to understand what your club's going to look like, right? Because here's the other thing: esports is not a video game club. Esports is meant to be competitive. And so for me, and you know, our recommendation is that practices are mandatory, just like any other sport. And so what you're seeing is that your soccer players, your football players, you know, your athletes who may want to be part of your team are not going to give up that traditional sport to join esports, right? And so that also has an impact on who comes out and stuff like that. So that's really been interesting, is the importance of holding an interest meeting for students and establishing the norms of your club that early, because it has a big impact on who comes out and stuff like that. Whereas, you know, if you're offering, you know, some of the kids may want to play CSGO and they find out you're offering Rocket League, well, that kind of changes the dynamic of who's on your team, right? So it's interesting, the importance of the interest meeting with students and why it's so early. It's important to have. And then once you do start to get your club established, right, you've gotten the approval from the Board of Ed or whatever it is that you need. We're finding that most of our schools are approving this as a one-year club with a club advisor stipend, right? We only have a few districts that are doing it as a sport, and hopefully that's going to change in September when we launch the varsity program. But from there, the other big thing is you kind of want to bridge the gap between club and team, right, by having some type of student leadership that oversees the whole program. So having the president of the esports, you know, club and the VP and all that stuff. And then from there, right, you start to have your head of Rocket League, your head of Overwatch, your head of, you know, whatever other game cut titles you have. And what's great about that is it does two things. One, it gives obviously the same SEL benefits of something like student leadership or student government. But number two, it allows you to kind of make your club both casual and competitive, and also have a certain entrepreneurial element to it. So you can have a marketing department, you can have a journalism, you know, part of your club and stuff like that. Because the other thing that we're starting to notice is that you want to have some type of baseline club experience, meaning that every week, you know, consistently, there's something going on, and it should be rather casual, right? And so we're offering a couple different things starting next year on that front. But the idea is that you have this club, esports club, again, competitive, whether it's intramural or intramural, right? It's competitive. However, it's more casual, where if you're there, you play. If you're not there, it's not a big deal. You don't play. They just fill your spot and stuff like that. And then from that more casual baseline experience, you want to pull your competitive varsity team. And that's because, you know, traditional sports has a JV and a varsity team. And the reason is there's no point in getting blown out, right? You don't want to take an athlete who is not ready or capable and enter them into, you know, your state championship tournament. And so what we're seeing is that piece of taking your most competitive, most talented team and letting that be kind of your varsity experience, right, seems to have better outcomes than if you try to have your whole program be only a varsity experience, if that makes sense. So there has to be space for the JV kids to play and grow and get better, challenge for starting spots and stuff like that. Around this time, you want to make sure you talk to your IT people, right? They get really upset and often too left out. You know, they hear about the esports program the day it's, you know, the day before it's supposed to launch. And we want to make sure that we're not doing it to them, because they got to open up the ports and they got to whitelist the games and the launchers and all that stuff. And so always making sure that you involve IT early and often will make sure that they're your best friend. We want to have communication channels, not just with students, especially if we're doing virtual learning, but also with parents. So a lot of schools have turned to Discord, but Discord isn't for every school. My school won't approve Discord. So we use traditional stuff like Google Classroom, Remind, Google Chat, believe it or not, right? Are all ways that you can do that asynchronous planning amongst students in a maybe different way that gets approved, right? Have your hardware, IT, ready to go, test it out. And then, you know, if you're in New Jersey or even on the East Coast, right, we would love to have you in Garden State Esports. If you don't have a home to play and are on the East Coast, we'll take you. But there are a lot of wonderful state organizations out there. There's about 20 of us representing different states, as well as all the NASIF affiliates that you can find on the NASIF site. And so from there, it's as simple as once you have joined a league, and please, please, please look to educator-run leagues, nonprofit leagues that are by teachers for students. Please don't sign up with a Play Versus. Please don't sign up with a Generation Esports. They monetize kids. They have no interest in doing what's best for kids, right? There are plenty of organizations out there that are teacher-run, and that's where you should be looking for your advice in your league play and stuff like that, not these for-profits. But then you have your safe, inclusive gaming space, you got your league play, and then as you start to practice and coach your team, you can start to implement, right, some of that other stuff as well, like your SEL curriculums, your CTE curriculums and all that good stuff, which if Jesse didn't mention, if you sign up for the Esports Playbook promo, Jesse,
I'm getting there.
Tell them what they win.
I'm getting there. So is this okay? So really quickly, we just wanted to quickly tell you about the book. Obviously, there's a ton of great information we didn't even get to in this presentation. I think one of the most interesting parts of the opening panel was how we talked very little about the specifics of like the logistics of creating the club, because honestly, I think it's so important to have those conversations about laying out the benefits of the book. And actually a lot of the people you saw in that opening panel were key parts of helping create the book. So the foreword of the book was done by Jim O'Hagan. We have our good friend Mike Washburn, who hosts the On Education podcast, do a brief history of esports. And we broke the book up into 4 major sections. The first being the why of esports in schools, which you've already heard us talking a little bit about here. So really focusing on those SEL benefits, what an SEL curriculum would look like for esports, and how to kind of start to make the case for if you were going to run a program about that. In Virginia, if you know nothing about gaming, that actually is totally perfect, because when we make the pitch about the book, what we always tell people is whether you have never played a video game in your life, if you're a gamer who's just looking to kind of expand upon what you're already doing in your school, or if you're just someone who's interested in doing something that's going to benefit your students, this book is a great place to start, because we don't even start tackling the games and the logistics until the fourth part of the fourth part of the book. So that's part 1, the why of esports in schools. Then it's changing perceptions. I talked a little bit about this during the opening section, but the opening panel. But there's going to be people who have concerns about video games in schools based on the conversations that have been happening, for like decades. Too much screen time, toxic gaming culture, violence in games. And so what we've done is we've gone out, done all the research, and we have it there for you. So did you know, for instance, that your body, when a student is playing esports, their heartbeat is actually going as fast as some marathoners, or people playing basketball. So take a look at the content we provided. That will help kind of lay your conversation or kind of lay out the conversation for. You're right, Rochelle, everyone is on their screens anyway. So it's too much screen time is now a problem that goes way beyond video gaming. It's our phones and our basically our digital lives. So we lay out all of those perceptions to help you engage, or the research to help you engage in conversations around those perceptions. The third part, which Chris already talked about a little bit, is working with your school stakeholders. So we identify who are those stakeholders, what roles do they play, and what are the conversations you need to make sure you start to have. So even though Chris and Steve are really our esports gurus that took part in helping write this book, Christine and I have both sat in school districts as administrators and are familiar with what it takes to get successful programs off the ground, both school-wide and district-wide. So we lay out some of our thinking there. And then finally, in the 4th phase of the book, we talk about what does designing an esports program look like? How do you run it? And the truth is, and Jim mentioned this during the opening panel, it's okay if you've never played a video game or you're not comfortable with it. The kids are. And what they need from you is guidance and supervision as an adult, and kind of giving them some insight into the conversations they need to have, or kind of the ways they need to behave, rather than the content area expertise. The kids will have that. What they need is someone like you who's willing to pioneer and lead alongside with them. So you'll be surprised the leadership roles that students will take. So we talk about designing the program. We also cover in that section some funding options, as well as kind of a look to the future. And then Chris mentioned this, our launch promotion. We started running this, but we were only going to run it for a few days. But because of the success initially of the book sales, we wanted to run it for a little bit longer. If you order off Amazon, there's a form located at that bit.ly/esports playbook promo where you can upload your proof of purchase, and you will receive not one, but 2 digital esports resource kits that we will send to you, one now, one later. The first is a starter kit with a bunch of curated articles and resources from Steve and Chris's work. And then early next year, you'll be receiving a curriculum resource kit with a bunch of resources, including SEL, content creation, health and wellness. So a bunch of things that will help to support your work in your school, getting your program off the ground.
Thank you, Jesse. I did want to, my hope was that we'd have a little more time, which we do, to conquer a few more questions. Thanks to everybody who said they ordered the book. Virginia, I love your question about the how will I know. There's interesting things there. Chris said it, ask them, play, internally. But also, to be very honest with you, I think we're at a point, especially in our middle school program, where, once a bunch of kids want to start competing, let them have that experience. They're pretty, they have pretty tough skin in terms of that. And the sportsmanship among the community has been really great. But I think they'll start to, play and that inspires them further and all of that. But they'll let that if they're ready. And or if they're just ready, meaning they want to start. But please feel free. Any other questions? I think we have a few more minutes. I don't know when they boot us out of here, but
while we're waiting, I just need you to know
4.
that my phone's been blowing up because since this session has started, Disney announced an Obi-Wan series with Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader, a Ahsoka series, a Lando series. the internet's breaking.
Oh no.
I don't know.
I thought you were going to say your phone was blowing up because sales of the book were just going through the roof, but
no, I can't even focus on it. Yeah, there's more. I haven't even told you everything. There's more.
Well, and you've got Baby Yoda in Fortnite, and I have the Mandalorian skin, that came with the new season. So we've got that.
I know nothing of which you guys are speaking. Although I did see Yoda in Fortnite. The other stuff, I don't know what Mandalorian is.
Well, I don't know much of it either. I saw one episode of the Mandalorian, but go ahead. Somebody was.
I think they were yelling at me.
I think you have to get to level 98 in this season to get Baby Yoda. So that's motivating.
Mrs. Johnson, I just want to just say, yes, that was the key thing that Jim mentioned in the opening session. It's not about being the expert in the room. It's about being passionate and making yourself vulnerable and available for kids. Mm-hmm. This is the way.
Mando. Okay. I'll work that into my conversation with the kids tomorrow. Mando.
So, hey.
I have a question. I have another question. So it's like once you join the GS, whatever that was that you put up, yep. Is there levels? Like, do they level them out? Like if they lose a lot, do they go to like another tournament bracket or like how does that work? Like, especially because I'm like mostly elementary school, so I don't want to have my sixth graders.
What we're doing with Garden State what we're doing with Garden State Esports is kind of based on what we've seen over the last 18 months. And there is a need, right? We'll call it, I go back and forth between calling it like a JV experience or a casual experience, but what we're seeing is there needs to be a kind of like baseline kind of casual experience where kids can come and be competitive, if they want to. So they drop in, they come and they play, right? It's not necessarily mandatory. And that's kind of like the baseline experience, right? That's something that continues throughout the season or the program. But from that casual experience, you want to pull your kids that are, you know, the most competitive, maybe the most talented, and around those kids you build your varsity program, right? So it's similar to how you have a JV team who plays on Mondays when the varsity team's playing Friday nights. There has to be kind of, we're finding there has to be some kind of like casual baseline experience, because what's happening, Virginia, is at the most competitive levels, it used to be just a tournament, right? That's what a lot of other programs were doing, is a tournament. Well, the problem with a tournament is you lose once and you're done. Well, what are you doing for that rest of the time that your school approved the esports team as a year-long club, right? So the next step, and what we're having a lot of success in, is modeling athletic seasons. So in the fall, you have a season, right? Maybe you play for 12 weeks. The schools that you play, right? What we're finding is we try to model them after, again, athletics. So all those schools that are in the same conference together, that are rivals, right, should also be playing esports together. And that's what gets kids really excited, is that local competition and stuff like that. And so after the season, right, again, like your traditional sports, you take your best teams from the season, and that's what turns into your district or region and state championship and stuff like that. So you have this casual experience where if you kind of just show up and play, or you don't, it's cool, you come in, it's fine. But then you also have this more serious experience from that casual experience where you're expected to be there, you're competing in seasons, and you have a roster, and you have to show up, and you play at the certain times, you enter the tournaments and stuff like that. So it's you know, almost like a feeding program. I'm working on some visuals to better explain this, because it's kind of new in what we're finding. But imagine like a pyramid where you have that kind of casual experience that goes up to like your season competitive experience into your tournament series.
And also remember the important part too, is that there are going to be some kids that want to be the competitive players, and then there's all the other kids that want to just be involved. And
Right.
the whole the esports ecosystem supports all of that. So the whole idea there was like, let's create an environment where kids who just want to be in the space have, you know, a place. So there's that too. But Chris did a good job explaining like all the, because there is of course the competitive stuff, just like there would be for any sport.
Mm-hmm. I got to make some graphics. It's my next job, to better explain that, because it's pretty new, and I've been explaining it to districts, you know, what it's going to look like, and I think that's a really winning formula based on feedback and experience and stuff like that.
And there's one last question. The session's already over, but if you could just answer if there's any resources to recommend on the top of NASP to help get started.
If you go to gsesports.org, that is our Garnet State Esports website. The resources page has a bunch of free getting started guides, as well as I do a lot of pre-mades. So districts can just take our Google interest form for students, and they can take our convincing your district presentation, and then you could just sub in all your own stuff for your district. So we have a lot of pre-mades. We have a lot of getting started. I just finished with Regina our really strong getting started guide that'll be up on the website in the next couple of days. So look for that. But that's like a 6-pager, step-by-step, everything you can need. So between NASIF, the Garnet State Esports resources, and then, you know, see if you can get a hold of one of those nonprofit teacher-run leagues that I mentioned, and you'll find some of them listed on NASIF. And I have a recent Twitter post. Let me see if I can grab it real quick, where you guys can see who has state organizations. If you want to hang out, I will go dig that up real quick. I tweeted it on Saturday. Here you go. So these are the 18 state organizations along with New Jersey. So check them out, retweet that for me, favorite that for me, just because, like I said, I want teachers and students going to these types of programs and not these for-profits like Play Versus who don't care about kids. So it looks like Iowa, Ohio, Missouri, Washington, Texas, Indiana, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, Illinois, Nebraska, Michigan, and a few others all have state organizations you should check out, and all the resources and links for them are there too. If you don't see your state on there, go check out NASIF. And like I said, on Garden State Esports, all of our resources are free. So even if you're not from New Jersey, because not everybody's perfect, you can still use those.
Thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure to spend the time with you, and appreciate all the activity in the chat and everything.
And we just want to thank you, presenters. It was a great informative presentation. And to remind everyone that all the presentation materials will be on SketUp. And if you want to provide any feedback, so we can continue to provide you with the support you need for esports program, we'll highly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, real quick, Chris, I just wanted to say thank you again for last Saturday when our Rocket League teams went up against each other.
Yeah, man.
My team was so happy to be a part of it, and so I just wanted to throw that out.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we had a great time. If you didn't see us, my kids casted the ISTE esports matches.
Yeah.
We played against Chris's high school kids who whooped on us.
As well. I mean, but I mean, well, you know, my kids are older, I guess, you know, but no, we were really impressed by your stream. That's something that we strive towards.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, it was good. It was good stuff. Thanks for participating.